Hello and welcome to this video. While I'm working away on these new paintings, I'm going to be doing a voiceover, chatting about my studio session and how I've been using creative rules and briefs to break through creative block or overwhelm and get painting. If you're new here, my name is Orla and I'm a freelance artist, illustrator and designer whose other big love outside of art is nature and the outdoors. I make videos about creativity in nature, often bringing my art outside. I've called this series of work I'm making Finding Nature, and I've made a whole video sharing what the wider project is all about. I'll pop a link around here and in the info down below. In short though, it's a series of original mixed media paintings on A5 sized paper, which I'm making to generate new ideas. Having been painting full-time for the last 5 years or so, I've really settled into my ways of working, and I thought that sharing some behind the scenes into my process might spark some ideas for you to try too. Before I get cracking with the painting, I love to do some writing to help me focus in on what I'm looking to explore. From my background in design, I like to write loose briefs, which help me structure my painting sessions. I find this a great way to avoid overwhelm, which I find can be especially easy to fall into within abstract painting. I write out the aims of my painting session, the feelings I want to explore, and the experiments I want to try. In these paintings, I aim to explore icons and motifs. The feelings I wanted to work to capture was all about play, exploration, wonder, and adventure. You know that feeling of discovery you get when you learn something new? This is what I love so much about being outdoors and what I celebrate in my work. Feelings and emotions drive my use of colour, which helped me choose the palette that I'm using today. And the experiments were using gouache, a medium I'm relatively new to, acrylic being my main medium of choice. I like to write out one final sentence that accompanies my bullet points to summarise my focus. I love working on many paintings all at once. The painting process really inspires my work, alongside the landscape and all of my other external influences. I take ideas from marks as I make them and improvise with them as I paint. So hopping between pieces and working really quickly helps bring energy and rhythm to my work, as well as keeping it fresh. I find that this fast-paced way of working and working on multiple paintings gives me the same feeling of discovery and adventure that I get when I'm outside, and that's what I'm really looking to capture. And so if I can find that feeling during the process of the painting itself, I find that it often translates across in the final work. I find that pre-selecting my materials, colours and tools helps build consistency in my paintings. I've naturally developed a colour palette over the years of practicing, which are personal to me, my experiences and my painting practice. If you're looking to start exploring colour, I find it really helpful to select a limited palette of 3 to 4 colours and explore how they all work together before adding any more. For me, there is nothing worse than a blank piece of paper. I love to add washes of colour, marks or textures to my paper before I begin the work. This takes the fear out of starting and lets me warm up with no pressure. I like to try different base colours so that I can explore how the following colours and materials will react as they build. For me, the more layers the better. Even if it gets totally covered up, these layers add depth to each painting. And sometimes I deliberately make this first layer ugly or use difficult colours so that I can use the following layers of the painting to problem solve my way back to a place of harmony and balance. Whilst I'm waiting for the base colour washes to dry, I've decided to do some sketches. I make these thumbnails occasionally to get thinking of shapes and colours, marks or compositions that I attribute to my brief. Sometimes they are sections of previous paintings that I like and want to try exploring at a larger scale. Being honest, most of the time I ignore these preliminary ideas and just follow my nose as soon as I pick up the paintbrush. It's important that I never feel bound to these initial sketches. Sometimes having a full plan for a painting removes the improvisation and all the fun of the unknown. It only leads to disappointment when I can't create the fixed idea in my head. If I plan too much, I've created a right and a wrong, which only leads to more tension in the work, and things tend to fall apart. It's better to start out with a rough direction and let the painting tell me where it wants to go from there. My approach to painting is all about improvisation. Whilst it might look like wild abandon, I have set rules, materials, movements, and marks which all hold meaning for me. And within these exercises and frameworks, I let myself be free to explore how they interact. The rules and brief give me structure within which I can be loose and experimental and play. I suppose the rules are like my own playground, a safe and contained space to explore. I find that painting is such a funny balance of control. There's the total control you need over a medium, an understanding of how materials react in thousands of iterations, combinations, and applications. It's like having a library of processes and predictions in your head. Herein lies the skill or the craft of painting. There's the control of focus, of knowing how to get yourself into a place of flow, or at least the discipline to paint regularly. And then there's the need to have very little control and just trust in the process and your experience to create something meaningful. It's this balance of trust and control which comes with practice and time. I find it so intriguing to learn about people's habits. I love learning about other artists' processes and ways of working in the studio. Everyone develops a practice that is so personal to them, and you can learn lots about a person from their daily habits. I think a studio practice is a total reflection of how a mind works. I love to multitask across multiple paintings, work quickly with intense focus, and then step back from the work, and that probably says a lot about me. This is how I build up my layers in my paintings, which span across several days. I love working on the floor because it lets me get up and move around, get distance to see connections between the paintings I'm working on. Each practice will be individual to best accommodate a person's personality, body, and preferences. So if you're looking to paint regularly, make sure you listen to what feels good for you and adapt to suit your own needs. This is where I left the first layers from this studio session to dry, to come back fresh to the next day. To be totally honest, I wasn't feeling in full flow when I was working on these pieces. It's important to know that you don't need to feel the spark at all times when you're painting. That's where the rules and the briefs come in to catch me and to support me to keep my direction. Although I wasn't feeling it in this session, I had done what I set out to do, and most importantly, I got something down on paper. As predicted, when I came back to the studio the next day, I could see way more interesting things in the work. And also, knowing that I am free to just paint over everything gives me so much solace, and anything I don't like will lead to problem solving a new solution that I could never have found without that uncomfortable layer in between. The next day I took these base paintings outside to the river and joined my friend and fellow painter Emily for some good old plein air painting. I'll leave a link to their work down below. It was my first time in a long time painting with someone else, and it is so much fun to do. I really need to do this more often. There is so much to learn from other people's processes, which is, I suppose, partially why I'm focusing on mine in this video. If you can, grab a friend and some materials and head outside soon. I wanted to focus these works on the feeling of play, exploration and discovery. So I decided to focus this outdoor painting session on hunting for colours, patterns and textures I could see in front of me. I looked for pops of colour, the way the water moved, how the branches of trees were shaped, the patterns of brickwork on the riverbank. Then it was down to improvisation to play with these elements, working them onto the bases using acrylic inks, gouache and soft pastels. I always try to hold very little expectation of my work. I don't mean that I don't think my work is any good. It's more like I don't need each piece to be perfect. Kind of like the over-planning I mentioned earlier, when I apply pressure for a painting to be great or to work out, it nearly always ends up failing miserably. And this can be a really tricky emotional dance to balance, especially when art and creativity becomes career. But that, my friends, is a subject for a whole other video. This is another reason why I love working on multiple paintings at a time. There's more opportunity to experiment, to take risks, and to reduce the pressure. There's a quote, I'm going to completely butcher it, but it goes something along the lines of that successful people have failed the most. For every win, there's been 100 experiments gone awry that we just don't know about. So in fact, the goal could be to fail as much as possible. When I got back to the studio from working outside, I added some coloured pencils, peeled off the tape, the most satisfying bit, and titled the works. I'm always amazed at how much the paintings come together and sing when the tape is removed, and they have some clean space to breathe. And this is only elevated even further when you frame them and you hang them. If you're wondering, the tape I'm using here is called frog tape, and you can get it at most hardware stores. Some titles I had already planned before the painting session, and some titles came in response to the final work. I like to take this time to title my work because it helps me reflect on what I was looking to capture, especially if I had pre-titled the piece. Sometimes pre-planned titles need to change to better fit what the work has evolved into, and this is always a really interesting thing to notice for me. To wrap up, one of the most rewarding things to do is to step back from the work to see connections between the paintings. I find that taping them up on the wall helps me with this, and I can live with them for a little bit. I hope this video has been interesting for you and has sparked some ideas to try out in your own painting practice. And if you've got something from this video, give it a wee like for me and let me know if you do make it outside for that painting session in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you outside.